They set fire to my house while I was working a double shift. I want you to sit with that for a second. While I was out protecting the city of Coral Springs, Florida, while I was in my office signing warrants and reviewing incident reports and doing the job I've done for 31 years, someone walked onto my property at 2214 Biscayne Ridge Drive and started a fire in the detached garage of a home that has been in my family since 1997. The fire marshal ruled it arson within 72 hours. I already knew it was arson before he told me. And what I need you to understand is this. The man I believe was responsible was the president of my homeowners association. A man in a linen blazer who had been trying to fine me out of my own home for 8 months. A man who had told me to my face, in a meeting room full of witnesses, that he intended to force a lien on my property if I did not pay fees I had already proven I did not owe. I am going to tell you exactly what happened. And I need you to stay with me, because the part most people cannot believe comes near the end. What would you have done if someone burned your house and you had 31 years of law enforcement experience and the full weight of your department standing behind you? Tell me in the comments, because I thought about it a lot. My name is Rosa Camacho. I am 54 years old. I am the chief of police for the city of Coral Springs, Florida, and my house did not burn down. Let me back up. My father came to New York from Ponce, Puerto Rico, in 1969 with $40 and a cousin's address in the Bronx. He spent 32 years as a detective with the NYPD. He retired with a gold shield and a bad knee and a daughter who followed him into the work. When he died in 2011, I kept that shield. It sits in the top right drawer of my desk at the station. I touch it sometimes when a case is heavy. He would have understood everything about what I am going to tell you. I moved to Coral Springs in 1997 after my second promotion. South Florida was growing fast, the department was building, and I wanted space. I bought a 4-bedroom house in a subdivision called the Crest at Biscayne Ridge. At that time, the HOA was quiet. 42 homes, annual dues of $1,800, a reserve fund, normal stuff. I raised my daughter Elena in that house. I repainted it twice, refinished the floors, added a screened lanai, built the detached garage that would later become relevant. The house had grown with me. By 2023, the appraised value was $1.1 million. Not a mansion, by some standards, a mansion by mine. The HOA started changing around 2019. That is when Bradford Connolly joined the board. I want you to remember that year. It matters. Bradford Connolly is 61 years old. He is a real estate attorney who practices in Boca Raton. He drives a white Range Rover. He wears linen blazers and loafers without socks in December. He has the kind of voice that sounds like it is always slightly above where a normal conversation should be. Not loud, just elevated. Like every sentence is a minor verdict. The first time I met him at a board meeting in February 2020, he referred to the HOA's governing documents as our operating framework, and paused afterward like he expected applause. He did not know what I did for a living. I want to be precise about that. When I introduced myself at that first meeting, I said, Rosa Camacho, Biscayne Ridge Drive. I did not say Chief of Police. I have learned over the years that leading with that title in neighborhood settings changes conversations in ways that are not always useful. So I sat in the third row and I listened. The first unusual thing Connolly did was propose an amendment to the HOA's assessment structure. He wanted to reclassify certain lots, specifically the 6 largest properties in the development, including mine, as enhanced residential parcels, subject to a supplemental annual fee of $3,400 on top of existing dues. His justification was that larger properties required proportionally more common area maintenance. He had a presentation, slides, a graph. I remember thinking, this man prepared for this. This was not spontaneous. I voted no. The amendment passed 4-1. That was the board vote. And that is when I started keeping records. I did not know yet that I was building a case. I just knew that when something does not add up administratively, you document before you question. 31 years of police work made that instinct automatic. I want you to remember that I started the file in February 2020. It comes back. For 2 years I paid the enhanced fee under protest. I noted the protest in writing every single payment cycle and sent it certified mail to the board's registered address. I flagged the assessment methodology to a property attorney, a woman named Sandra Flores, at a firm in Fort Lauderdale, who told me the amendment was almost certainly unenforceable as written, but would require a legal challenge that could cost between $8,000 and $15,000 to bring to court. I filed the opinion. I kept paying. I kept documenting. What I did not know yet, what I found out much later, is that Bradford Connolly had done this before. Not in this subdivision, in 2 others. But that is not the worst part. Let me tell you what escalated things. In January 2023, I received a formal notice of delinquency from the HOA. It claimed I owed $7,650 in unpaid fees and penalties. I pulled my payment records going back 4 years. Every payment, every certified mail receipt, every cancelled check, I owed nothing. I had, in fact, paid $2,200 in fees the HOA had no legal right to assess. I had been overpaying. I wrote back, formally, certified mail. I attached 43 pages of documentation. I stated clearly that the alleged delinquency was factually incorrect and that I reserved all legal rights regarding the improperly assessed supplemental fees. Sandra Flores reviewed the letter before I sent it. 3 weeks later, Bradford Connolly called me. Not the board, him personally. He said, and I remember this exactly, "Chief, I think you misunderstand your role here." He had learned my title by then. Someone had told him, and he was using it. Not to respect it, but to draw a line. He was telling me that my position carried obligations, that as a public official, I had an interest in avoiding conflict with community institutions, that things could get complicated if this became adversarial. I wrote down what he said while he was still talking. I dated it. I added it to the file. 3 days after that call, the HOA filed a lien on my property. The lien stated that I owed $7,750 in unpaid assessments plus $1,200 in administrative fees. Total, $8,850. Filed with the Broward County Clerk on February 14th, 2023. I will never forget the date because it was Valentine's Day, and I had taken the afternoon off for the first time in 3 months. I was sitting on my lanai drinking coffee when Sandra called to tell me it had been recorded. A lien on my home, for fees I had proven I did not owe, against a property worth $1.1 million, filed by a man who had just implied, on a recorded phone call, that I should not make things adversarial. I want you to understand what was on the line. Not just the property, not just the money, my credit, my retirement security, my daughter's inheritance, the home my father never saw, but that I built in his image. Every room clean, every document organized, every payment on time for 26 years. That is what they were threatening to take. That night I sat at my kitchen table with my father's badge in my hand, and I did not sleep. Have you ever had someone come after not just your property, but your name? Someone who looked at everything you had built and decided it was available? Because that is what Bradford Connolly was doing. And I need to know I am not alone in that feeling, because the isolation of it, the way neighbors suddenly got quiet, the way a few of them stopped making eye contact at the mailbox, that part was harder than the lien. That part hurt in a different way. I called Miguel Reyes the next morning. Miguel and I had worked patrol together in 1998. He went to the fire marshal's office 15 years ago. He is the kind of man who does not say much, but when he talks, you need to write it down. I did not tell him about the lien immediately. I told him I thought I had a situation developing, and I wanted a second opinion from someone I trusted completely. He said he would come by that weekend. Before he arrived, I did something that changed everything. I pulled the Broward County property records for Bradford Connolly personally. I also pulled the public records on the 2 other HOA communities in Broward, where I had heard his name mentioned in passing. I had an instinct. You develop them after 31 years. What I found in those records is the part that still makes me go quiet when I think about it. Bradford Connolly had been a board member in 2 previous subdivisions. In both cases, within 18 to 24 months of his joining the board, the HOA had filed multiple liens against higher value properties. In both cases, when those liens were unpaid or contested, the HOA, through a management company called Meridian Ridge Solutions, had moved to initiate foreclosure proceedings. And in both cases, properties had been acquired at below market value through distressed sales by homeowners who ran out of money to fight. Meridian Ridge Solutions. I want you to remember that name. I cross-referenced the state corporate filings. Meridian Ridge Solutions, LLC, was registered in Florida in 2017. The registered agent was a law firm in Boca Raton, Bradford Connolly's firm. He was not just the HOA president. He was the management company. He was running both sides of the transaction. And the properties that had been acquired through those foreclosures, 3 of them had been resold within 2 years at prices between $180,000 and $340,000 above what the distressed sellers had received. I do not know yet what that number adds up to across all his schemes. But that night, sitting at my table at 11:30 with a cold cup of coffee and 6 open browser windows, I knew I was looking at a pattern. And that pattern had a name in my world: fraud. Then he sent someone to watch my house. I noticed the grey Hyundai parked on the street for the 3rd consecutive evening on a Tuesday in March, a man with a telephoto lens. I ran the plates, rental car. I had one of my detectives quietly check the rental agreement. The car had been rented by a private investigation firm out of Doral. I did not confront the driver. I documented the dates, times, and plate numbers. I added them to the file. Then I got a call from the Broward County Inspector General's office. An anonymous complaint had been filed alleging that I had used city resources, specifically department databases, for personal research in connection with a private property matter. Someone had filed a complaint against my department access. Someone was trying to get my professional certification reviewed. I want you to understand what I was looking at. A court date. Sandra had filed to vacate the lien, and the hearing was set for May 9th. That gave us 8 weeks. 8 weeks against a man who had orchestrated this in at least 2 other communities, who had a PI watching my house, who had just tried to trigger an IG investigation against me. And then, 3 weeks before the hearing, someone started a fire in my garage. The garage where I kept my original purchase documents, my payment records, my HOA files going back to 2019. They burned at approximately 1:15 in the morning on April 17th. The fire suppression system I had installed in 2021. Because I had stored important documents in that garage, and I am a person who thinks about contingencies, contained the fire to the garage structure. The house was untouched. The documents were gone. But I had already scanned every page and uploaded them to a secure cloud system 6 months earlier, when the situation started feeling like something I needed to treat as evidence. Every single document survived. Miguel Reyes was at my property by 3 a.m. He did not need me to tell him this was arson. He told me. He said there were 2 separate points of origin and an accelerant consistent with lighter fluid. He also said, and this is the part I still think about, that whoever did this did not know what they were doing. A professional arsonist does not leave 2 origin points. This was someone who panicked, someone who was running out of options and made a mistake that would define the rest of their life. The formal arson investigation opened the next morning under the Broward County Fire Marshal's office, with Miguel as lead. Because the crime occurred in my jurisdiction, and I had a personal interest, I recused myself from any city involvement and referred everything to the county. That is protocol. But I was still a victim, and victims have rights. Here is something I want you to know, because it matters. When a crime occurs that involves a public official as a victim, the jurisdictional framework creates a specific kind of accountability that private citizens do not always have access to. The state's attorney office takes those cases seriously in a different way, not because public officials matter more than anyone else, but because targeting a law enforcement officer to suppress evidence in a property fraud scheme is not just arson. It is obstruction. It is witness tampering. It is potentially a federal civil rights violation if the intent was to interfere with an officer of the law in the exercise of their duties. Sandra called me 2 days after the fire and said, "Rosa, your case just got very different." She was not wrong. The PI surveillance, the IG complaint, the timing of the fire, the pattern from the prior subdivisions, the connection to Meridian Ridge Solutions, Miguel and a team from the state's attorney office spent 3 weeks building a criminal referral. I handed over everything in my file. All of it. 43 pages of original documentation, plus the scanned records. A timeline I had been maintaining since February 2020. 3 years of certified mail receipts. The recording of the phone call where Connolly told me to reconsider being adversarial. 6 days before the civil hearing on the lien, Bradford Connolly's attorney filed an emergency motion to postpone. The judge denied it, and then we walked into that courtroom. The room was small. Broward County Civil Court. A Thursday morning in May. Sandra sat next to me. Miguel was in the gallery as a material witness. There were 11 other homeowners from the crest at Biscayne Ridge in the seats behind us. I had not asked them to come. They came because word gets around, and because some of them had received enhanced assessment notices in the months since I had filed my challenge. Bradford Connolly sat at the opposing table in a grey suit. Not linen this time. Grey. His attorney was a young woman from his own firm who looked like she had not slept in several days. The judge reviewed the documentation for 22 minutes without speaking. I remember the sound of the air conditioning, the scratch of Sandra's pen, the stillness. When the judge looked up, she vacated the lien in its entirety. She found it procedurally defective, factually unsupported, and, her exact words, indicative of a pattern of bad faith enforcement. She ordered the HOA to pay my legal fees. She referred the matter to the Florida Department of Business and Professional Regulation for review of the management company's licensing. I did not smile. I did not react. I sat steady, and I listened to every word. Connolly's attorney asked for clarification on the referral. The judge told her the referral had already been transmitted. That is when I saw it. The moment his face changed. It was not dramatic. It was actually very quiet. He looked at his hands. Just for a second, and I thought about every homeowner in those other subdivisions who had run out of money and given up a house they should never have had to sell. I thought about the ones who never got a moment like this one. The criminal referral resulted in a Broward County grand jury indictment 6 months later. Bradford Connolly was charged with organized scheme to defraud, wire fraud, and arson in connection with the April 17th fire. I am not able to discuss the specifics of the criminal case publicly while it remains active. What I can tell you is that Meridian Ridge Solutions had its Florida license revoked. The HOA board was dissolved by court order and replaced with a court-appointed administrator. The three families in prior subdivisions who had sold at distressed prices were identified as potential civil plaintiffs. A Saturday morning in November. I am on my lanai. The garage has been rebuilt. The new structure is concrete block, and the filing system inside it would make a county clerk nervous with envy. I have a cup of coffee. It is 81 degrees, which in November in South Florida is just a regular Saturday. The bougainvillea I planted along the east wall in 1999 is doing what it always does in the fall. Going a little wild, a little brilliant, a little impossible to contain. My father's shield is on the table next to my mug. I brought it outside that morning because I wanted to feel the weight of it in the light. He was right that I had a role. Bradford Connolly just had no idea how far it reached. Here is what I want you to carry from this. A lien filed against your property in Florida, and in most states, is a cloud on your title. It does not mean you owe the money. It means someone has made a legal claim, and until that claim is challenged, it sits there affecting your credit, your refinancing ability, and your ability to sell. The critical thing most homeowners do not know is that a lien can be vacated, removed entirely, if it is procedurally defective or factually unsupported. But you have to challenge it. A lien you do not challenge becomes a lien that collects interest and grows. The people who design these schemes know that. They count on you being too tired or too scared to push back. Document everything from the first unusual moment. Dates, amounts, names, exact language. Certified mail creates a paper trail that matters in court. And if an HOA management company is also the law firm or the corporate entity connected to board members, that conflict of interest is something a state regulatory body needs to know about immediately. Know what is filed against your name. Know what encumbrances sit on your title. Pull your own county property records once a year. It takes 20 minutes and it costs nothing. What you find there can save you everything. My name is Rosa Camacho. I am 54 years old. I am still right here in Coral Springs, Florida, in the house I have lived in since 1997. They burned my garage. They did not burn my home. And they did not burn what I built. Neither should you. If you have lived through something like this, a fraudulent lien, a management company that turned out to be running something it should not have been, a board president who thought your home was available, I want to hear it. Drop it in the comments. I read everyone. And if someone in your life needs to hear this story, share it. There are people out there right now who have a lien notice on the kitchen table and think they have no options. They need to know that is not true.